Marry her, the woman I just saw sleeping under the Wabash Avenue Bridge. A CEO's shocking inheritance condition sparks an unbelievable journey on Courageous Voices. Stay with us. The air in Arthur Davies's old law office, nestled on a quaint cobblestone street in Chicago's Loop, was thick with the smell of old paper and heavy silence. Damian Sinclair, 40, interim CEO of Sinclair Media Group, sits motionless in a worn leather armchair. His impeccably tailored Armani suit seems as out of place in this somewhat dated space as he does in the bizarre terms of his late father's will. Damian's handsome but angular face is gaunt, his usually sharp blue-gray eyes now sunken, hiding a look of weariness and endless boredom. Arthur Davies, an elderly lawyer with thinning white hair and kind but sad eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses, clears his throat, breaking the silence. He slowly reads the last lines of the will left by Alastair Sinclair, the eccentric and controlling media tycoon. And the final clause, Damian, Arthur's voice was flat and emotionless, is the finality of your inheritance of the entire estate, including the controlling stake in Sinclair Media Group and a trust fund worth $500 million. In order to inherit and use these assets for the purpose of reviving the corporation, you, Damian Alastair Sinclair, must legally marry within 30 days of the official publication of this will. Damian barely reacted. He had heard too many crazy things from his father during his lifetime, and this will seem to be his last cruel joke from the grave. Arthur continued, his eyes filled with a hint of concern. If after 30 days you are unable to meet this condition, the entire estate will be donated unconditionally to the National Longhair Persian Cat Conservation and Development Association. This time, Damian could no longer keep his composure. He laughed, a dry, bitter, sarcastic laugh. Persian cats? His father, the man who had spent his life building a media empire, who had manipulated every detail of his life, now wanted to leave his fortune to a bunch of cats because his son wouldn't marry. Sinclair Media Group, the dying brainchild of the family, was on the brink of bankruptcy thanks to Alastair's own bad decisions and mismanagement in his later years. Creditors were closing in, competitors were circling like vultures, and here was the only lifeline his father had left him: an arranged marriage within a month. Sir, Arthur looked at Damian, his voice full of sympathy. Today is the first day the will is being read. You have exactly 29 days to find a bride, or perhaps learn to love cats. What happens when a desperate CEO makes an offer to a homeless woman under a bridge? Keep watching on Courageous Voices to find out. Damian felt his blood rush to his head. Anger, humiliation, and utter despair swirled inside him. He needed a wife, anyone, now, not for love, not for happiness, but for the survival of Sinclair Media Group, for the silent promise he had made to his mother, a kind woman long dead, that he would not let her hard work be destroyed. The next few days passed like a nightmare. Damian had neither the time nor the mind to search for a rich young lady or arrange a traditional marriage. He needed a solution that was quick, efficient, and most importantly, with as little legal or emotional hassle as possible. The thought of hiring a fake wife crossed his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. The risk of being exposed, of being blackmailed, was too great, especially in this sensitive situation. He threw himself into work trying to find other financial solutions to save the company, but all doors seemed to be closing in on him. His father's legacy was his only hope. The marriage condition was like a knife hanging over his head. Damian often drove around Chicago's night streets during sleepless nights, his mind spinning with calculations and deadlocks. His luxurious Bentley glided along the busy avenues, then turned into smaller streets, poor working-class areas that he had never set foot in before. He saw a different Chicago, a Chicago of miserable lives, dark corners that his upper-class world had never touched. One night in late October, the drizzling rain and the cold wind bit the flesh. Driving through a remote area near the Chicago River under the dim yellow light of a streetlight, Damian happened to see a figure huddled under an old concrete bridge. The person used a tattered plastic sheet to shield themselves from the cold wind and drizzle. An unusual curiosity, perhaps born of his own extreme desperation, made Damian stop at a safe distance and observe. It was a woman, although her clothes were frayed and muddy and her long, dark hair was tangled and covered most of her face. There was something about her appearance that caught Damian's attention. She was not lying there enduring the cold, she was sitting against a bridge pillar trying to read a crumpled paperback in the weak light from the only working streetlight. Every now and then, she would reach up and pull back the tarp, shielding the book from the rain. In an impulsive decision, one that he could not explain later, Damian got out of the car and approached. The sound of his footsteps on the wet concrete floor made the woman startle and raise her head. In the dim light, Damien could see her face more clearly. She was quite young, perhaps in her 30s. Her delicate face, though gaunt and tired, could not hide her intelligent features, but what really surprised Damien were her eyes, a pair of large, deep blue eyes like the winter night sky, strangely bright, reflecting resilience, a little weariness, and a deep sadness. "Who are you?" Damien asked, his voice dry. The woman did not answer immediately. She hugged the book tightly to her chest, her eyes filled with suspicion. "What do you want?" "I have a proposition," Damien said bluntly. He was tired of pleasantries. "Do you want to make a lot of money and have a home, at least for a while?" The woman's blue eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What are you going to do?" "I'm Damien Sinclair, and I need a wife quickly." He looked straight at her. "I'll pay you $100,000 if you marry me, a 1-year contract. After that, we'll divorce and go our separate ways. You'll have money, a fresh start, I'll get what I need." He didn't elaborate on the details of the will, only saying it was for complicated personal reasons. The woman stared at him, trying to read the stranger standing before her. $100,000, a home, these were things she'd never dreamed of in her current situation, but the offer was too strange, too unbelievable. "Why me?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "A homeless person like me?" Damien shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, though there was a strange urge inside him. "Because you're the first one I've met, and you don't seem too much trouble. I don't have time to be picky." The woman was silent for a long moment, seemingly considering. The desperation in her eyes flickered, then was replaced by a sudden determination. "My name is Serafina Munizera," she said. "I accept your offer, but on 2 conditions. First, I get to keep this book and my few personal effects. Second," she hesitated, "there's an old friend of mine in the nearby shelter, Grace, who's sick and in dire need of medicine. You have to help her." Damien nodded without hesitation. "Fine, consider that part of the deal." He had not expected this girl in her dire straits to ask for nothing for herself but to think of others. And so, a strange contract was signed under a cold Chicago bridge between a desperate CEO and a mysterious homeless woman. The wedding took place the next morning at City Hall, so quickly and secretly that it was almost invisible. Only Damien, Serafina in the neatest clothes Damien had bought for her, and lawyer Arthur Davies were the only witnesses. There were no real wedding rings. Arthur gave them a pair of plain gold ones to do the paperwork. No flowers, no blessings, no relatives or friends, just awkwardness and a sense of unreality. Serafina Moon, the woman without a penny, was now officially Mrs. Sinclair. Soon after, Sarah followed Damien to his penthouse, a lavish, opulent space with sweeping views of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline. The apartment was designed in a modern minimalist style with cool colors and expensive but unwarm furniture. Sarah entered, overwhelmed by the wealth but also feeling a sense of strangeness and loneliness. This place was so different from the under bridges and dark corners she was familiar with. Damien showed her to the guest bedroom, spacious and comfortable, but as cold as the rest of the apartment. He treated her politely but completely aloof, as if she were a newly hired employee rather than his wife, in name only. He provided her with new clothes, toiletries, and a weekly allowance. He asked her to stay mostly in her room, to limit her movements around the house, and to not come into contact with anyone without his permission. "This is a business arrangement, Miss Moon," he made clear. "Remember your role." But Damien couldn't help but feel surprised. Sarah, freshened up and dressed in clean clothes, though still the simple ones he had bought her, revealed a hidden beauty. Her pale skin had turned rosy from her days of wandering. Her dark hair, after being carefully washed and combed, was soft and shiny, and her deep blue eyes, no longer tired and weary, were even more attractive, shining with intelligence and a deep sadness that was hard to describe. He was also shocked to see that she spent most of her time in her room reading the old books she had brought with her, and the books in his small library. Her knowledge and her thirst for knowledge surprised him. This homeless girl was clearly not simple. On the rare occasions when they were forced to talk, usually when Damien announced some social event that Mrs. Sinclair was required to attend to please Mr. Davies and the curious board members, Sarah began to reveal a little about her past, albeit very cautiously. She told him that she had graduated with honors in journalism from a prestigious university on the East Coast and had a promising job at a small but prestigious investigative newspaper, but then a major incident happened. She would only say in general terms that she was deceived and betrayed, causing her to lose everything from her career, her house, to her trust in people. She did not go into details, and Damien, although a little curious, still tried to act indifferent, not wanting to be drawn. into the personal troubles of his hired wife. At a few social events where Damien was forced to bring Sarah along to introduce his new wife, she once again surprised him. Although initially a bit shy and unfamiliar with the luxurious fake atmosphere of the upper class, Sarah proved to have amazing communication skills. She does not try to impress, does not speak empty words, but only silently observes, listens, and occasionally makes intelligent, sharp comments on current affairs or art, surprising and admiring those around her. She has a natural charm, a quiet charm that even expensive dresses cannot hide or create. Victor Sterling, Damien's arch-rival in the media world and also a prominent member of the board of directors of Sinclair Media Group, begins to pay special attention to Damien's mysterious wife. Sterling, a tycoon in his 50s with a refined appearance, but always with a cunning and cruel look in his eyes, feels that something is wrong with this quick marriage. He sends people to secretly investigate Serafina Moon's past. At this time, Sinclair Media Group is facing a new media storm, even more serious than its current financial difficulties. One of the group's leading tabloids, the Chicago Chronicle, is being sued by a powerful politician for publishing a series of false investigative articles that defame him. The lawsuit seeks tens of millions of dollars in damages and worse, threatens to revoke the newspaper's license to operate. Sinclair Media's reputation, already fragile, is now in danger of collapsing completely. Damien is on pins and needles, knowing that this could be the end of everything. Sarah, despite Damien's orders not to interfere in the company's affairs, has overheard his tense phone calls. Seeing the desperation on his face, she also reads documents related to the lawsuit that he carelessly left on his desk in the library. With the keen intuition of a seasoned investigative journalist, though that past was still a secret, Sarah noticed that there were many irregularities in this case. The evidence against the Chicago Chronicle seemed too perfect, too easy. She sensed that there was an elaborate conspiracy at work. She decided to talk to Damien. Mr. Sinclair, she began cautiously, seeing him sitting alone in the library, his face in shadow. I know you don't want me to pry into your affairs, but I've been looking through some of the documents from the Chronicle's lawsuit. I think something's not right here. Damien looked up, his eyes tired and suspicious. What do you know about this, Miss Moon? This is the complicated world of media, not the romance novels you read. Sarah was unfazed by his sarcasm. I used to work in journalism, sir. I have experience in investigations. I can see the signs of a fabricated story. This was the first time she had taken the initiative to reveal a more important part of her past. Show me the entire case file, maybe I can help you find the truth. Damien stared at her, a homeless woman, his hired wife, saying she could help him solve a major media scandal. It was ridiculous, but then he looked into her deep blue eyes, saw intelligence, determination, and a strange confidence. He was desperate, had nothing to lose. Okay, Miss Moon, he said, his voice filled with skepticism, but also a glimmer of hope. Show me what you can do. Over the next few days, Sarah seemed to transform into a different person. She was no longer her usual, quiet, resigned self. She threw herself into the case file with incredible focus and energy. Her room in Damien's penthouse had become a makeshift office with stacks of files and notes plastered across the walls. Damien, though still skeptical, couldn't help but be drawn to her professionalism and methodical approach. Sarah quickly discovered holes in the evidence against the Chicago Chronicle. She found overlooked witnesses, conflicting details, traces of outside interference. She enlists Arthur Davies, an old lawyer who has begun to see Mrs. Sinclair differently after witnessing her intelligence and determination to help her with legal matters and gather more information. She also connects with a young idealistic but frustrated journalist at the Chicago Chronicle who is willing to cooperate to find the truth and save the newspaper. During the investigation, Sarah and Damien are forced to work together day and night. They analyze documents together, interview witnesses together, secretly, and face false clues and dead ends together. The tension, pressure, and even potential danger because the mastermind will definitely not sit still unintentionally draw them closer together. Damien gradually puts aside his initial coldness and distance. He is truly impressed by Sarah's intelligence, sharpness, courage, and dedication. He begins to see her not just as a hired wife, but as a trusted partner and comrade, and a new warm feeling begins to blossom in his hardened heart. He realizes that he is gradually falling in love with this mysterious and extraordinary woman. The deeper they dig, the more they discover traces of Damien's arch-rival, Victor Sterling. In this case, Sterling seems to be using the politician as a pawn to bring down Sinclair Media Group, creating conditions for him to take over the entire corporation at a low price. As their investigation begins to make important progress, Victor Sterling also smells danger. He begins to act to silence them. Sarah receives anonymous threats. Damien's apartment is broken into, but nothing of value is taken. Only documents related to the lawsuit are ransacked. One evening, while Sarah was alone collecting more evidence in a rather deserted area, she was stopped by a group of thugs who tried to steal her briefcase. At that moment, Damien appeared. He had been secretly following and protecting Sarah from afar. After noticing the signs of danger, he rushed to her rescue regardless of his own safety. Despite suffering a few minor injuries, he fought off the thugs and brought Sarah back to safety. In that moment of facing danger, when Damien hugged Sarah tightly to shield her, all barriers between them seemed to disappear. And at that moment, another important part of Sarah's past was exposed. In her panic, she accidentally dropped an old press card from her wallet, a card bearing the name Serafina Moon, but with the once famous pen name Phoenix. Damien picked up the card, stunned. Phoenix? You're Phoenix, the investigative journalist who exposed the Omnicorp corruption scandal 5 years ago? The case shocked the nation, and Phoenix became a legend in the journalism world before suddenly disappearing without a trace. Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She told Damien the whole truth. After exposing Omnicorp, in which Victor Sterling was one of the major shareholders and the mastermind behind the illegal activities, she had been brutally retaliated against. Sterling had used his power and money to ruin her career, spread false rumors, caused her to lose her job, be shunned by her friends, and even had her life threatened. She had been forced to live in seclusion, change her name, and finally, when all her resources were exhausted, she became homeless, living under a bridge. The current scandal at Sinclair Media, with its sophisticated tricks and Sterling's involvement, had too many similarities to what she had experienced. She knew she had to do something. Damien hugged Sarah tightly, his heart filled with a strong emotion, admiration, pity, and deep love. He found not only a wife but also a hero, an extraordinary woman who had suffered too much injustice. He vowed to never let anyone hurt her again. With the undeniable evidence that Sarah had collected, along with her own testimony about Victor Sterling's past crimes, Damien decided it was time to end it all. He called an extraordinary meeting of Sinclair Media Group's shareholders and invited representatives of the media and press regulatory agencies to attend. At the meeting, to the astonishment of everyone, Serafina Phoenix Moon, Damien Sinclair's homeless wife, bravely stood up and exposed the entire plot of Victor Sterling with sharp arguments, solid evidence, and an emotional story about her life. She not only cleared the name of the Chicago Chronicle, but also exposed the true face of one of the most powerful tycoons in Chicago. Her speech was not only an indictment, but also a call for truth and justice in the media industry. Damien stood beside Sarah, holding her hand tightly, his eyes filled with support and pride. He publicly acknowledged his wife's extraordinary value and talent, calling her the beacon of truth, who saved Sinclair Media Group and his own life. Victor Sterling, faced with irrefutable evidence and public outrage, has completely collapsed. His plot to take over Sinclair Media has gone up in smoke. He will face legal investigation for both his past crimes and his current wrongdoings. After the storm, Sinclair Media Group seems to be reborn. The reputation of the group and Damien Sinclair personally has been restored strongly, even beyond what it was before, thanks to his courage to expose the truth and his commitment to building a clean press. Serafina Moon, or rather Phoenix, became a media phenomenon. Her story of going from homeless to hero to save a media empire inspired millions across the country. She received countless job offers from major newspapers and famous television stations, but more importantly, she regained her honor, her voice, and her life. When everything had calmed down, Damien and Sarah sat together in the penthouse, which had once been a symbol of a cold covenant, but now witnessed the blossoming of true love. As Sarah, Damien began, his voice sincere and a little hesitant, "I owe you an apology for my selfishness, my materialism, and my bad treatment at the beginning. I didn't tell you the whole truth about my father's will. About the real reason I chose you under the bridge." He told her everything, holding nothing back. "I was stupid enough to think I could buy a wife with money to solve my problems," he continued, his eyes filled with regret, "but fate brought me to you, the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You not only saved my company, but you also saved my heart and soul, helped me regain my faith in humanity, in love, and in truth." He took her hand. "Our contract legally may still be there, but I don't want it to be just a contract anymore. Sarah, I love you. I want to build a real marriage with you based on the respect, trust, and love we've built together." Sarah smiled, a gentle, warm smile. "I love you too, Damien." Even though their beginnings were a little unconventional, she understood his situation at that time and she felt his change as well as his sincere love for her. Her painful past seemed to have been soothed by this man's love and protection. She decides to return to journalism under the once famous pen name Phoenix, but this time she will work in a new position, perhaps in charge of a special investigative column at one of the most prestigious newspapers of Sinclair Media Group, where she will have complete freedom to pursue truth and justice without having to fear any dark forces. And they decide not to divorce. Their unwilling marriage, which began with a strange will clause and an unlikely meeting under a bridge, has now become a true love, a strong bond of two souls who have weathered storms together. Sinclair Media Group, under Damien's wise leadership and the positive influence of Serafina Phoenix Moon's sharp, humane investigative reporting, has become one of the most respected and responsible media groups in America. They are not only focused on profits but also on serving the community, protecting the truth and the voice of the vulnerable. Sarah, as a leading investigative journalist, remains simple, compassionate, and fierce in pursuing justice. She still regularly visits her old friends at the shelter, especially Mrs. Grace, who has fully recovered thanks to the help of Damien and Sarah. She also established a small fund called Phoenix Rising to support young journalists from difficult circumstances, but full of enthusiasm. Damien Sinclair has completely transformed. He is no longer the cold, cruel CEO of the past. He became warmer, more attentive, more considerate of the feelings of his staff and those around him. He found joy in the simple things of everyday life with Sarah. Their penthouse was no longer cold and distant, but filled with books, landscape paintings drawn by Sarah herself. She also had a hidden talent for painting, melodious music, and cozy dinners prepared by them. Today was their unexpected wedding anniversary. Damien decided to surprise Sarah. He took her back to the old bridge on the Chicago River where fate had brought them together, but that place had now completely changed. It was no longer dark and damp like a year ago. The bridge had been renovated into a small community art space with colorful murals, lovely stone benches, and a small stage for street artists. This was a charity project that Damien and Sarah had been secretly sponsoring. As the sun set, dyeing the Chicago sky purple, Damien turned to look at Sarah, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. He pulled a small dark blue velvet box from his pocket. Inside was not the cheap imitation ring that Arthur Davies had given them a year ago, but a real exquisitely designed wedding ring. The face of the ring was a sapphire as clear as Sarah's eyes, surrounded by small diamonds representing the guiding stars. Serafina Moon, the love of my life, Damien said, his voice sincere and emotional. A year ago, in this very place, I made a foolish and selfish offer out of my own desperation. Today, I would like to make another offer with all my heart, love, and appreciation. He knelt down on one knee. Will you continue to be my wife, not because of a will or a covenant, but because we love each other, because we belong to each other forever? Sarah smiled, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. She nodded without hesitation. Yes, Damien Sinclair, I do, forever and always. Damien carefully placed the ring on her finger. They shared a passionate kiss under the romantic Chicago sunset. Their love, a love that had sprouted from the most unexpected circumstances, had overcome all barriers of social status, past hurts, and initial calculations to find a happy ending. They were not just husband and wife in name, they were soulmates. Comrades who fought and won together, who saved and changed each other's lives. Damien and Sarah's story is a testament to how sometimes second chances come from the darkest places, and how true love has the power to heal, to light up, and to change everything. Her past, a painful but powerful past, has truly changed everything, not only for Sinclair Media Group, but also for Damien Sinclair's heart and life. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story on Courageous Voices. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share the story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.